Health is defined as the physical, chemical, emotional, and environmental well-being of a person and their body's ability to adapt to their internal and external environment. And last time we spoke about the 4 pillars of health and the 2 different forms of stress which impact our health. And today we're going to be focusing on distress, which is the negative forms of stress which negatively impact our health and well-being. A great analogy that I use a lot with my patients is the analogy of the stress bucket. So we have the stress bucket here, and we have the stresses on top. So we've got physical, chemical, mental, and environmental stresses. Now, if I was to ask you to think of some forms of physical stress, most people would usually say things like, well, a car accident, a fall, an injury, and you're dead right. So all of these forms of physical stress, these go into the stress bucket. Now, if I was to ask you, what's the very first form of physical stress everybody goes through, what would you say? Most people will agree that the very first form of physical stress that all of our bodies go through is being born. So we start off life. The figure is we have a couple of thousand falls before we actually learn to walk properly. Now, if I was to ask you, if you were to have a couple of thousand falls within the next few months, how do you think you'd feel? You wouldn't be feeling great. So learning to walk is also a big stress in our body. Play silly sports and get sports injuries. We get pushed down the stairs by our siblings. The other form of stress is chemical or nutritional stress. So this is one of the biggest problems that we face nowadays at the moment. Chemical stress is everything you eat and everything you drink. And especially in the UK, literally everything we eat and we drink is being either processed or man-made or filled with caffeine, sugar, or man-made substances. Some people will then start to take medications or painkillers, and anything that's man-made or synthetic and not natural, that will be a chemical stress in our body, because our body is completely natural and is meant to metabolize natural things. So the more man-made things and processed things we put into our body, the unhealthier our body will be for the longer term. The biggest form of stress is, without a doubt, mental stress. With physical stress, you're able to turn that tap off. You can stop the activity that's making you worse. With chemical stress, you can change your diet and start a new diet right now. With mental stress, you can't do anything about it. You can't all of a sudden just turn off the tap. You're feeling grief because somebody's passed away, or you're feeling upset. Maybe there's been a breakdown of some relationship. With the mental stresses, you can't just quit your job the next day. The stresses are always there. Previous video, we also talked about all the environmental stresses around us. Now, the good news is that our body is amazing at putting up with all of this stress that we put it through. But the bad news is that it can only put up with so much before it will start to let you know about it. It's literally like adding straws to a camel's back, where you can keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding, and stress going on and life going on. And then all of a sudden, what do you think happens? Our body will start to let us know that it's reached its threshold. So then the bucket starts to become full and overflowing. And then when it becomes full and overflowing, it starts to let us know, it starts to tell us off in the form of symptoms. And the problem is, what do most people do with symptoms? They do one or two things. They either ignore it and they go, I'm sure today will be a better day. Or they'll go, I can't take these symptoms anymore, I'm going to try and mask it with painkillers. Now, if you're just trying to deal with the symptoms, is that doing anything at all to help with the root causes of your problems? No, not at all. So by trying to mask and hide your symptoms, you are literally putting your body under even more stress. So these symptoms feed into the stress bucket, and then you get stuck in this vicious cycle. And this vicious cycle just makes the stress worse, it makes the pain worse, and when the pain's worse, the stress gets more, and when the stress gets more, it makes the pain worse. So fast forward 5, 10, 20 years, you really end up in a not so good position. If I was to ask you what's the average age somebody sees a chiropractor, what would you say? It is actually around about mid-40s to 50. So what that means is that people are often putting up with lots of stress through life. It's taking a toll on their body, physically and mentally. They've been stuck in this cycle for a long time. And then they want me to fix it, usually yesterday. And the likelihood of that is 0. To use the analogy, each adjustment that we have is literally like punching a hole in this stress bucket. So I see you here on Monday, I see you here on Thursday, and we're trying to do the adjustments which will help bring your body into a more relaxed state, which will help with your mobility, and which will help with your pain and your symptoms, which will help with your posture. And when you're starting to physically feel better, you'll then start to mentally feel better. And when you're starting to mentally feel better, you can make better decisions. So then you start to eat better, you start to make wiser choices. And then when you start to make wiser choices and you become overall healthier, you look at the environment around you and you start to change things around you. So we're trying to break up this negative cycle so you can start to not only feel better, but also be healthier for the longer term.